Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode, Jared Verse, defensive end out of Florida State. We're going to be evaluating him based on his production data profile and other statistical factors. Verse played football for the Albany Great Danes before transferring to Florida State, which is very interesting indeed. And we're going to talk about his defensive market share data. So if you're new to the channel, new to the stuff that I do, defensive market share is where you take an individual statistic divided by the team total statistic. Then you take that number and then you compare it to every single edge rusher in my database to give you a percentile score, which kind of shows you, how well they did in that particular number. And then you grade all the players and see, okay, where were the All-Pro players based on the averages of the position? Where are all the Pro Bowl players and where were the starters? To kind of give an idea, okay, where do you need to test in your production to end up having that potential? Well, when you look at the numbers for Jared Verse, he tested okay. 60 percentile in terms of solo tackle data, 60 percentile also in terms of sack data, and 80 percentile in terms of his tackle for loss data. Those numbers are decent. They're closer to the starter averages and the Pro Bowl and All-Pro averages, but that's still a decent number to make. When you look at his other metric numbers, his other market share numbers, his forced fumble data was in the 30 percentile, and his pass deflection data was in the 47 percentile. So those numbers are not as great as the other players. Typically, you want to be above average in terms of your forced fumbles and pass deflection data, but you don't necessarily have to be that to be, a starter, All-Pro, or Pro Bowl player. Moving on to adjusted production data. So adjusted production takes into account things like strength of competition, strength of team, and of course the age of a prospect. So how productive were you for your age? How productive were you for the level of competition that you faced? But also how productive were you for the team that you were on? Because obviously starting at a team like Florida State is a lot different from starting on a team like, well, I hate to say it, Albany. So he was able to make the team at Florida State, which obviously means something in terms of data, if you will. And his MSA rating was market share data, strength of schedule, SRS and Age score, and then the pass score adds in things like the forced fumbles and pass deflection data, the extra data to kind of give you like a gumbo number in terms of his overall production. When you look at these numbers, Jared Verse did not do as well as you would want him to do. Biggest factor limiting him is his age. He tested in the 20 percentile in terms of his age metric. And in terms of his overall production, again, it wasn't elite. It was more closer to like a starter. And those are kind of the big concerns here. He had a 60 percentile MSA rating, 59 percentile in terms of his pass rating, and a lot of that stuff, again, is influenced by his age. His age really knocks him down a lot, and with the fact that his production wasn't exactly elite. When you look at some of the pro comparisons for him, not a lot of guys to really point to based on his pro comparisons. There's a handful of guys, but most of these guys, as you can clearly see, are like backups. Rotational pass rushers, those types of players. Not exactly elite day one, day two prospects, which brings me back to the outlook for Jared Verse. Jared Verse profiles as a backup to long-term starter based on his overall data. His biggest data weakness is that his age and lack of elite solo tackle and sack production. Many view Verse as a top edge rusher in this class, but the data suggests he would become a massive outlier to meet the expectation of his day 1 to 2 draft status. So what does that mean? That means that if Jared Verse goes in day 1 or day 2 of the draft and he becomes just sort of a backup to rotational pass rusher, he will not really meet the expectations of where he was drafted, with the exception of maybe day 3. Day 3, a lot of guys in there are kind of like backups, rotational guys a lot of times, high-end rotational players. So, but for the most part, Jared Verse just doesn't quite get it done in terms of his overall data. Now, again, if he tests well as an athlete, I think that definitely will help his case to kind of take him earlier. But again, when you look at the overall data for him and how productive he was and those other sort of factors, it just doesn't exactly look like an elite level edge rusher prospect, let alone somebody that you really should be eyeing until, again, day 3 kind of area for him. So, with all this stuff out of the way, this, of course, is the end of the episode. My name is Jim Coburn. You can check out my other information at Twitter at Geometrics, at JIMETRICS. Also, check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/jcoburn. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace!